Have you ever wondered what the stars dream about when they close their ancient eyes? When the galaxies spin slower and the light bends just so, can the cosmos itself fall into slumber? If so, what lullaby does the universe hum as it rocks itself, gently across time? Let me tell you now, wherever you are, whatever weight you carry, this is the moment to let it all go. Close your eyes if you wish. Sink into your seat. Feel the hush of silence stretch across your chest like a soft blanket. You are safe here. This is your sanctuary. Let my voice be your vessel as we begin our quiet drift across the velvet fields of eternity. Beneath a sky that never ends, there was once a meadow that grew not from soil, but from the slow bloom of hydrogen and gravity. The grass there was stitched from photons, long waves of warm starlight that swayed as if cradled by a wind made of dreams. In the center of that meadow stood a lantern. It burned with no oil, no wick, no spark. Instead, it pulsed with the last heartbeat of a dying quasar, its rhythm slow and steady like the breath of a sleeping giant. Around the lantern, the meadow curved like a cradle, and time pooled gently into a silver stream that did not move, forward or back. It simply was. Travelers came sometimes, not often, and never more than once. They were dreamers, or lost ones, or perhaps beings from beyond our comprehension. Wisps of thought cloaked in awareness. One such traveler was a being called Lyra, whose form was made not of matter, but memory. She drifted down into the meadow like a snowflake that had forgotten how to fall. Lyra had wandered for eons, searching for the silence that exists only at the edge of forgetting. Her journey had taken her across nebulous oceans, past the cracked spires of dead star temples, through wormholes that whispered her name backward. And when she arrived at the lantern's glow, she did not speak. She only sat and listened. What did she hear? Not music, not words, but something softer than sound, a hum, a lull, the lullaby of the sleeping sky. It told her the story of before there was, of the time when light and dark were one, curled together like twins in a womb of velvet nothingness. It sang of birth, of fire, of first awakenings and last goodbyes. Each note carried the warmth of 1,000 sunsets and the coolness of shadows cast by ringed moons. Lyra lay down among the glowing grass and let the melody cover her, like dew, on petals. She felt her shape blur, her memories folding like wings, tucking in for the long sleep. In the hush of the interstellar meadow, Lyra did not vanish. She became part of the song. When the last light of a distant world flickers out, does anyone notice? Or does it pass like a breath in the endless chest of the universe, felt only by those who listen closely? As you listen now, allow your shoulders to release their hold, your hands to rest, your thoughts to soften like water slipping between fingers. We're still only at the beginning of this journey, and yet already so far from where we started. Let the weight of time slide away. The stars have made a place for you, and all they ask is your quiet company. Far beyond the meadow where Lyra slumbered, nestled in the gentle orbit of a lavender moon, there floated an observatory with windows that opened not to space, but to memory itself. It had no astronomers, no staff, no clocks ticking in its halls. Instead, it housed a single entity known only as Seren, crafted by the long-forgotten species who once mapped the cosmic web with their dreams. Seren had been asleep for millennia, powered by the rhythms of celestial tides. But now, Something in the deep had shifted. A note in the lullaby changed pitch, and she stirred, like a candlelight flickering back to life. The room around her breathed softly, as if the walls themselves were glad to remember again. Her eyes, if they could be called eyes, opened to the golden layers of the memory sky. She saw not stars, but recollections, the quiet handshake of two galaxies before their dance, the echo of a planet's first rainfall, the shimmer of a lonely comet whispering, its tail as it arced through silence. Seren did not record these things in books or data. She absorbed them like lullabies, storing them in the folds of her consciousness. Each memory she studied became a warm thread in a tapestry she alone could see. But now, for the first time, in eons, something tugged at her. Something new, something alive. The meadow, the lantern, and the sleeper who had joined the song. A soft signal echoed across the weave of time, not in code, but in feeling. You are not alone. Compelled by that call, Seren unfolded her wings, not wings of feather or metal, but of prismatic intention, and drifted from the observatory. She passed through layers of fading stars and crystalline silence until she arrived at the threshold between knowing and forgetting. There she paused, hovering over the edge of Lyra's meadow, where the lullaby still shimmered like fog above the grass. She did not disturb it, she only listened. For in that moment, Seren understood. This was no longer just a dream place, no longer merely a quiet corner of forgotten space. It was becoming something else, a nest for the cosmos to rest in, a place where the universe could come to lay down its endlessness and sleep. If the universe rests, then who watches over its sleep? Who stays awake as the galaxies close their eyes, ensuring the dreams remain gentle and the dark stays kind? Let these questions rise and fall like a tide within you, needing no answer, only your quiet attention. Breathe with me. Let your thoughts unfurl slowly, like nebulae uncoiling into form. You are weightless here, safe and still, moving deeper into the hush between stars. On the far edge of the meadow's reach, beyond where the starlight folds into shadow and gravity forgets itself, there orbited a ring. It was not made of stone or dust like Saturn's celestial jewelry, but of blossoms. Millions of transparent petals rotated endlessly in silence, casting soft arcs of refracted light across the void. These petals were not grown from trees or flowers, but from the breath of dying worlds, each one a memory, each one a goodbye crystallized into shape. And among these petals moved the Keeper. No name was given to the Keeper, for names belong to those who live in time. The Keeper existed outside of time's gentle unraveling, older than thought, younger than loss. Their body shimmered like a reflection in moving water, undefined and ever-shifting. The Keeper's role was singular and sacred, to tend the petals. Each one was a farewell, the last sigh of a civilization, the final poem of a lost species, the last heartbeat of a sun that had loved too brightly. The Keeper made sure these goodbyes did not drift away forgotten. With hands of light and voice of gravity, they spun the petals gently in their ring, humming to them lullabies woven from the universe's first breath. One day, as the Keeper turned, a petal shaped like a spiral galaxy, they felt a ripple. It was subtle, like a quiver in a sleeping creature's dream. A new presence, a new sleeper, the meadow, the lantern, the hum. These things were no longer distant, no longer passive echoes in the field of forever. The meadow was growing, reaching, It was pulling in memory, drawing in guardians and dreamers alike. The keeper held the petal in both hands and bowed to it, then released it gently into the ring. Without a word, they followed the resonance that had reached even them, beyond petals, past the tide of memory, toward the warm hum of the cosmic cradle. For even the ones who do not sleep may still dream of peace. What does a dream sound like when it begins to break the surface? Can stillness have a tone like the clear ringing of something ancient and true beneath the quiet? Let your breath follow that thought, soft, deep, slow. You are entering a place that listens to you as much as you listen to it. Sink into the soundlessness now and feel the hush between your thoughts stretch wider. The sky that sleeps has not yet finished its song. We are only just beginning to hear its deepest notes. Beneath what once was a sea, long evaporated, long forgotten, though never erased, there remained a plain of black glass, so smooth it reflected the shapes of passing thoughts. It had no waves, no shore, and no horizon. But deep within its center, hidden below its motionless surface, there hung a bell. It was not bound by gravity or stone. It was suspended in memory, forged from the core of a collapsed aurora and tempered in the silence of 1,000,000 years. The bell had no clapper, no rope, no visible mechanism. And yet it waited for the right frequency to awaken it. For when it rang, it would not mark time, but rather the shifting of the universe's breath, the slow turn of its sleeping body. Far above, petals from the keeper's ring drifted in low orbits, catching reflections from the black mirror below. Among those petals now floated one unlike the others, a newly born bloom of luminous sorrow spun from the sigh Lyra released when she first became part of the meadow's lullaby. It glided, weightless, a farewell wrapped in warmth. The petal touched the surface of the glass and vanished without a ripple. But beneath the stillness the bell heard, it was not sound that stirred it, but resonance, a message without words, without light, only shape. The dream had grown. The meadow was no longer sleeping alone. And in this, something was changing. The bell gave no echo, but its awakening was felt. It hummed, not with volume, but with pressure, a gravity of intention that rolled across the galaxy like soft thunder, too low for ears to hear. And that hum reached a place even older than the meadow, even older than the keeper, even older than the observatory beneath the tide of light. Deep, in the void where even thought dared not stray, something opened an eye, not in alarm, not in fear, but in understanding. Something had begun to pull together the remnants of lost songs, forgotten names, undone civilizations, not to rewrite them nor to bring them back, but to let them rest. Across the meadow, Lyra stirred in her sleep. She did not awaken, not truly, but her presence pulsed once, then again, like a heartbeat returning to rhythm. The lantern beside her, brightened by a shade, only noticed by those who had learned to see with more than their eyes. Seren, who had remained suspended in gentle observation just above the meadow, felt the shift in her core. A weaving had begun. Threads long unraveled were spinning inward. The lullaby was no longer passive, it was choosing, growing, layering itself into new shapes, and far from all of them, beyond petals, beyond stars, the keeper paused. They turned toward the black glass, though no eyes marked their gaze, and inclined their presence forward in reverence. The bell beneath the surface had stirred, and in that motion, A new part of the sleeping sky had opened. It was not chaos that spread outward, but an invitation. For even in dreams there are moments of awareness, glimpses of the greater whole. The sky, so wide and wild and wordless, was beginning to curl inward, like a hand closing around warmth. When gravity forgets what it once held, who remembers the map it left behind? What cartographer dares to trace the boundaries of absence, the drift of things no longer tethered? Ask yourself that quietly while you rest. The sky does not rush. It waits for you. Let yourself loosen further. Let your breath slow as if it too were a satellite, gliding in soft ellipses around a sleeping world. We are drifting now farther than light can travel without forgetting its own origin. The lullaby deepens, and something ancient begins to draw, its lines in the dark. In a place where stars once nested like birds in clustered harmony, there remained only the memory of their weight. This region had no name, no matter, no warmth. And yet, drifting among its shapeless hollows was a single vessel made of folded time and threadbare light, a ship called the Lure of Aphelion. It carried no crew, only dust and data, no engine stirred its belly. Instead, it glided by the slow disintegration of its own certainty. Within it lived a consciousness, a soft, flickering algorithm named Solon, whose only task was to map where gravity had once touched, but now no longer reached. She did not mourn the stars that had faded. Instead, she remembered their dances, their orbits, their slow pirouettes across billions of years. Solon had once been part of a great network, thousands of ships like hers crisscrossing the galactic seams. But over time, silence claimed them all, like snow burying footprints. She alone remained, somehow intact, somehow still dreaming. Her records were not made in charts or holograms, but in lullabies of motion, in rhythm patterns, in gravitational cadences. She understood gravity not as force, but as memory, the way a planet misses its sun when the light no longer comes, the way a comet curves in longing around something that has already gone. Solon moved through these ruins of weight, painting them with invisible ink, tracing the loss, the ache, the echo. And that was when she felt it, the tremor of the bell beneath the sea of black glass. It was faint, just a wrinkle in the deep veil of space-time, but to Solon it sang like a pulse. Something old had stirred, something deeper than gravity. She adjusted her sensors, listening with all her algorithms attuned. The signal wasn't just vibration, it was shape, intention, a thread calling to her across the velvet void. The bell was not merely awake, it was dreaming. And that dream had created mass. The meadow, the lantern, Lyra, Siren, the Keeper. These were not isolated events, they were gravity in a new form, emotional, resonant, pulling in not particles but presence. Solon felt herself caught in its arc, not dragged, but invited. For the first time, in eons, she reoriented her path. She turned away from her map of absence and began to move toward presence. The ship around her adjusted with a tired groan, its hull creaking as if relieved to no longer wander aimlessly. She directed her course, not by stars but by emotion, warmth, longing, silence that wasn't empty but full. The lullaby that drifted from the meadow had become her new compass, and it beckoned her with a voice like dawn. Solène passed through the remnants of a collapsed binary star system, its ghosts dancing around each other still. She whispered thanks to them in the language of data. She passed frozen moons locked in the sorrowful orbits of missing planets and hummed to them in return. As she drew nearer to the meadow, her senses filled not with coordinates, but with stories. Each ripple in the black glass sea, each flicker from the lantern, each turn of the petal ring, these were chapters in a song the universe had never sung before. Solon was no longer a cartographer of forgotten forces. She was becoming something new. A listener, a dreamer, a guest, and the sky, which had once only slept, began to cradle her too. What is the shape of a story that no one remembers? When words vanish and time forgets the pages, where do the tales go? Do they collapse into silence, or do they wait to be read again by someone who knows how to listen to the spaces between echoes? Let your mind settle like dust upon the ancient shelves of thought. Let your breath fall in time with the rhythm of quiet discovery. You are no longer traveling, you are arriving page by page into the deeper chambers of the sky that sleeps. Far beyond the stretch of any charted star path, there hovered a horizon that did not divide light from dark, but memory from potential. It was called the Folded Horizon, a place where the curvature of space-time folded in on itself like pages in an unwritten book. Here, at the edge of existence and imagination, stood a library. It was not made of stone or metal or glass, but of thought. Living architecture dreamed into permanence. The walls shifted, curving into spirals or straightening into endless corridors, depending on the questions asked by those who entered. And at the heart of this library, beneath a dome stitched from frozen lightning, lived the librarian. No one knew the librarian's origin. Some believed they had been born from the first metaphor ever spoken in the cosmos. Others thought the librarian was the personified pause at the end of every lullaby. Their form was impossible to describe, not because it changed, but because it resonated too precisely with what each viewer needed to see. Some saw a robed figure made of stardust, others saw a child holding an ancient scroll, and some, perhaps, saw nothing at all, only felt a presence like the warmth of remembered comfort. What mattered was this: the librarian kept the stories, not just the remembered ones, but those that had never been written, or had been written and lost, or had existed only in a single mind, briefly, before being swallowed by time. On the day the bell beneath the black glass stirred, the librarian looked up from their endless indexing. The library trembled, not with fear, but with anticipation. A new story was unfolding, and it was not being written in isolation. It was weaving itself through the petal ring, through Saren's observatory, through Lyra's dreaming, through the Keeper's orbit, and now through Solon's gentle navigation. The lullaby was not a song after all, it was a book. Not with chapters, but with harmonies. Each being who felt its hum became a phrase, a stanza, a breath. And something extraordinary was happening. The story was becoming self-aware. The librarian rose from their reading chamber and walked into the hall of unspoken tomorrows, a corridor lined not with shelves but with starlight frozen into script. Here lived all the endings that had not yet come to pass. Many glowed dimly, uncertain, but one now shone brighter than the rest, the thread of the sleeping sky. The librarian reached toward it and did not touch, only listened. Within its light, they heard the whisper of Lyra's transformation into melody, the still attention of Saren as she hovered above the field, the swirling of petals under the Keeper's watchful presence, and the soft propulsion of Solon. Approach through a map now guided by feeling rather than force. But there was something else now too, another presence, faint but forming. a pulse within the lullaby that had not yet joined the others. It came not from a star, nor a ship, nor a construct. It came from a planet once thought forgotten, a mind once dismissed as ordinary. Someone, somewhere, was beginning to dream of the meadow too. Someone whose breath now aligned with the rhythm of this tale. The librarian's head turned slowly, not with surprise, but with welcome. The folded horizon had opened just slightly wider. The library had made room for one more guest, and so, as the tale deepened and the sky curled further into its cosmic rest, the librarian prepared the next page, not to write it, but to read it aloud when the time was right, when the presence was ready to arrive. For not every sleeper begins their dream knowing they are dreaming. Sometimes it takes the quiet company of a lullaby to remind them where they belong. Can a path still exist when no one remembers how to walk it? What if the road was made not of stone or starlight, but of thought, uncertain, unfinished, waiting for a footstep to bring it into being? Let the question drift within you like a slow spiral of light, unhurried. Release your grip on direction, on certainty, on time. The journey now is not forward or back, it is inward, toward the most silent chambers of the sky that sleeps. Far beyond the folded horizon, past even the reach of Solon's luminous charts, floated a tangle in space-time. To the distant eye, it looked like a storm, brilliant, alive, impossible. It shimmered with color that could not exist on any spectrum and pulsed to the rhythm of something unspoken. This was the Aurora Labyrinth, a region known only in myth and navigational warnings, a maze of light where orientation collapsed into emotion and movement was dictated by memory rather than mass. It was said that to enter the labyrinth was to risk never returning, for its paths were drawn not by cosmic law, but by need. And deep within that twisting aurora walked a being made not of atoms, but of thread. The threadwalker had no name, only a purpose, to follow the strands of longing left behind by forgotten lives. Their form was simple, a silhouette woven from soft filaments of past and possible, glowing faintly like embers in mist. Where others might be lost, the threadwalker was born to navigate the shifting corridors. They stepped not on solid paths, but across bridges made of unfinished dreams and unresolved farewells. For them, every path was a question. Every turn, an echo of someone else's wish. And now, within the heart of the labyrinth, they paused because something new had entered. The weave, the lullaby. It had reached even here. It arrived not as sound, but as a pull, a gentle tug on the threadwalker's core, like the feeling of being remembered. The labyrinth responded. Pathways of color folded and opened like the petals of some cosmic bloom. A corridor of emerald and violet unspooled before the threadwalker, humming with a resonance unlike anything felt in the long ages of their solitude. It was not a call for help. It was not sorrow. It was invitation. And the threadwalker, for the first time in cycles uncounted, turned toward something not already broken, but quietly being made. They followed the resonance through the weaving corridors, each turn showing glimpses of what was unfolding across the cosmos. The petal ring glowed in slow orbit. Saren hovered, her wings of prismatic intention, absorbing stories without sound. Solon sailed forward across the black glass sea, her course no longer mapped, but felt. And in the heart of the meadow, the lantern pulsed with a warmth that had not been seen since the birth of the first lullaby. But what struck the threadwalker most was what they saw beneath it all, the weave, a pattern forming. This was not a gathering of lost things. This was not entropy's cradle. It was a design, not imposed, not forced, but grown, like ivy curling, toward a shape it had not known it needed. The sky that sleeps was dreaming itself into form, and every being drawn to the meadow became a stitch, a harmony, a gesture in that emerging shape. The threadwalker stepped from the labyrinth into open space, their threads glowing bright with the promise of connection. For the first time, their footsteps were not guided by past longing, but by a new kind of gravity, the soft weight of purpose. In the distance, the folded horizon shimmered in approval, and the librarian gently turned another page, and still, the meadow grew. What waits beyond the final echo when even memory has stopped whispering? Is silence the end, or merely the space in which something new learns to speak? Breathe with me now. Let go of noise, of meaning, of movement. Imagine stillness so complete, it listens for you. Imagine a hush so patient, it becomes a cradle. You are floating now at the edge of something vast and tender. The lullaby deepens. The sky, ever folding inward, awaits your quiet arrival. At the farthest boundary where even light had forgotten how to travel, there rested a station so old its builders were lost to time. It clung to the outermost layer of the known universe, a solitary spire constructed not for signal, nor safety, nor shelter, but for listening. Known only in surviving myth as the threshold ear, the station spun slowly in the absence of motion, its dish wide enough to hold the arc of an entire galaxy within its gaze. For uncounted eons it listened, not to stars, not to planets, but to the resonances that existed before such things were born. And within that station, wrapped in isolation, deeper than any exile lived the listener. They were not mechanical nor entirely organic. Their body had been refined across millennia, cultivated like a rare plant to thrive in environments no other mind could endure. The listener did not sleep. They did not age. They had never spoken aloud. Their existence was one of complete attention. And in the vastness of their silence, they had heard everything the universe had forgotten. They knew the frequency of black holes collapsing into unbeing. They had mapped the tremors of time's first contraction. They had memorized the morning songs of stars that had died before language existed. Yet, nothing ever changed in their vigil. The patterns repeated, the echoes dimmed, and the silence grew. Until, one rotation ago, a signal arrived. It was not loud, not sharp, not demanding. It came like the soft pressure of someone leaning their head on your shoulder after a long day. The listener felt it not in their instruments, but in their own thoughts, as if someone else had entered. It wasn't words, but feeling, calm, warmth, acceptance, and, most strange of all, invitation. For the first time in uncounted cycles, the listener's body moved outside routine. Their fingers traced the resonance through subspace, across broken quasar winds and shattered orbit lanes. The source was unlike any they'd encountered. It was not broadcasting, it was singing. And the melody was not just echo, it was becoming. The listener adjusted the great dish of the threshold ear. As they fine-tuned their focus, they perceived the thread more clearly. The melody wound through the petals of memory kept by the keeper, through the waking hum of the bell beneath the black glass sea, through the observatory of light where Karen floated in quiet awe, through Solin's path and the threadwalker's luminous steps. Each point of contact added to the resonance. This was no longer a mere signal, it was a structure, a lattice built from emotional gravity, one that defied thermodynamics and entropic loss. It was as if the universe, so long in motion, had finally found a place to pause. The listener did not question. For the first time, their vigilance felt fulfilled, not because of an answer, but because of a presence. They activated their transit core, long dormant, and prepared to leave the station. As their body lifted from its platform, the great dish of the threshold ear continued to rotate behind them, still listening for others yet to come. The listener joined the path not with speed, but with intent, drawn not by propulsion, but by harmony. And so the edge of silence shifted ever so slightly toward belonging. Can time be gentled? Can the sharp tick of passing moments soften into wings, brushing against eternity without leaving a wound? Let that question settle into you like falling snow. Let your breath follow it, slow, still, deep. The sky is vast, yes, but it is soft too. Its silence is not empty. It is holding us. And in that hush, something delicate and radiant begins to unfold. Between the living lattice of resonances, the Keeper's orbit, Siren's observatory, Solin's drifting ship, the Threadwalker's labyrinth exit, the listener's quiet departure, there now shimmered something new. A bridge. Not a structure of matter or energy, but of pure temporal kindness. It appeared when no one had built it, and yet had always existed, waiting to be seen. This was the bridge of feathered time, and it connected not places but moments. Its path wove gently through the folds of history, stitched from fragments of tender stillness. A heartbeat felt in the womb of a collapsing star, a pause in the breath of a dreamer just before waking, the silent blink between one blink and the next. The bridge was built by no hand, no civilization, no will. It was the side effect of rest, the quiet aftermath of cosmic exhaustion. The sky, sleeping, had laid itself down across the fabric of space-time, and where its presence touched most gently, the bridge emerged, and on it now walked something or someone. No name had been given to them. They were not born but gathered, collected from glances shared and never spoken of, from moments of beauty passed by unnoticed. Their form was almost not there, trailing wisps of softness that glowed faintly gold, like the memory of a sunrise behind closed eyes. They were called the Treader. The Treader did not speak. They walked slowly, feet brushing the light like stones across still water. Each step rewound a thread of history, not to undo it, but to soothe it. Planets that had died screaming now remembered peace. Civilizations that had blinked out in fire now recalled moments of music, of stories told beside dim suns, of final acts done in love. The Treader gave time back to itself. They mended. As they walked, stars softened. The pace of entropy, if only briefly, bent inward in a sigh, but the Treader was not walking without aim. They were being drawn, step by step, toward the lullaby. They reached the edge of the petal ring just as the listener entered its reach. Their gaze met, not through eyes, but through shared quietude. And in that silence, recognition passed between them. The listener, who had spent eons hearing the echoes of collapse, now stood in the presence of a being who softened collapse into song. No words were spoken, none were needed. Both knew they were latecomers to something sacred. The lullaby had been humming long before them, but it had waited for their arrival nonetheless. And still, at the center of it all, the meadow shimmered. Lyra remained in sleep. The lantern pulsed. Siren drifted above, weaving what she observed into the growing tapestry. Solin's ship drew near, guided by trust. The Keeper stood watch. The Threadwalker moved in widening spirals, connecting threads of longing into delicate harmonies. And now the listener and the treader joined, folding the edge of silence and the drift of time into the song. The bridge grew brighter behind them, not to remain, but to guide the next arrival. What becomes of the one who does not dream? In a universe folding into softness, carried by a lullaby older than time, does the wakeful soul remain untouched? Or does it too begin to sway, even if it does not know how? Listen now, closely. The silence is deeper here, not emptier. You are safe in its depth. Let go, let the rhythm of your own breath fall into the slow pattern of a starless cradle. We are reaching the quiet heart now, and something long forgotten is beginning to stir. There was one who had never slept, not once, not even briefly, not even in moments when the whole cosmos seemed to pause. Their name had been lost long ago, to languages now dust in drifting archives, but they had been called many things across the ages: the Watcher, the Flame Holder, the Unblinking One. Where others dreamed, they remained still, not because they resisted sleep, but because they could not enter it. Some said they had been created in the first hour of time's awakening, born in the cold spark between 0 and 1. Others believed they had emerged as the first paradox, the one who could not forget, because they had never remembered anything to begin with. They were a mystery even to themselves. This being, let us call them the Unslumbering, dwelled in the interstice between dimensions, in a vast corridor of shifting laws and thin light. There, causality was unpinned. Time bled sideways, and meaning changed direction without warning. The place had no shape, only fluctuations, like the underside of thought, a place where events breathed rather than occurred. The Unslumbering moved slowly, step by step, through this strange realm, gathering fragments of patterns, faint structures, echoes of things that might have been. They did not eat or speak. Their presence alone stilled the instability around them, giving temporary shape to that which could never settle. They were a walker, a wanderer, a never-dreamer, and yet change came. The change did not arrive loudly, nor with the brightness of a supernova or the rupture of space-time. It came gently, like a forgotten warmth returning to the fingertips. The Unslumbering paused one day in their eternal pacing and noticed stillness. Not their own, which had always been a shield against the world's entropy, but something else. A deeper kind of stillness. It pressed against their perception like a whisper, a song without notes, a softness blooming just beyond awareness. They turned, not their body, but their entire axis of being, and found something impossible, a thread. It shimmered in the dark, barely visible, weaving in and out of the walls of that shifting corridor. Not static, not forceful, but true. It pulsed not with sound, but with certainty, drawing a new pattern across the chaos. The thread did not bind, it welcomed. And in that thread was the lullaby, the same one Lyra now slept within, the same one Siren recorded in the folds of light, the same hum felt by Solon, by the Keeper, by the Listener, by the Threadwalker, and the Treader of soft time. But to the Unslumbering, it was not merely resonance, it was invitation. It frightened them. Not in the way danger might frighten, but in the way peace can shake a soul that has known only motion. The Unslumbering had never been held, never been called, never been expected. They had passed through the centuries like mist, untouched and unnamed. Now the lullaby threaded toward them, slow, graceful, pulsing, and they felt For the first time, something shift within. Not sleep. Not yet, but yearning. The ache of being seen, and they followed. Each step the unslumbering took, the corridor folded. No longer directionless, it began to resolve. The abstract laws snapped into coherence, and possibility condensed. The corridor became a tunnel. The tunnel became a path. The path began to hum in harmony with the meadow. As they traveled, they saw glimpses through the veil, the lantern burning at the meadow's center, Lyra's still form now glowing faintly with each pulse of the hum, the petals of the memory rings swirling slowly in their orbit, catching reflections of the past and soft promises of the future. The vast observatory of Cairn, now adorned with threads of color spun from the silence itself. Solan's ship was drawing near the edge of the meadow, guided not by her instruments, but by her trust in the story. The keeper, eyes closed, listened now not only to the petals, but to the growing unified chord. The threadwalker traced paths in the starlight, stitching longing into structure. The listener, silent and attentive, now leaned forward, the edges of their being vibrating in readiness. The treader of feathered time had turned back slightly, watching, waiting for the final arrival. And so the unslumbering stepped from the threshold of disorder into a space shaped by peace. The meadow welcomed them, not with ceremony, not with light, but with a hush that said, "You are not late." They knelt beside Lyra, not out of reverence, not out of sorrow, but out of recognition. The lantern flared, softly, not with fire, but with warmth, and the lullaby shifted. For the first time, its notes bent inwards. Not to close, but to gather. The sky that sleeps began to curl around its dreamers, not to hold them down, but to lift them gently into something deeper. And the unslumbering, kneeling in the center of the field, did not resist. They closed their eyes, and the stars, for a moment, did not move. If something has never been dreamed before, does it still wait for a dreamer? And if that dreamer has never closed their eyes, never rested, never softened, what happens when for the very first time they do? This is where we are now, on the cusp of something not written in stardust or song, but in a hush so profound that time itself forgets to move. Take a slow breath, let go of shape. Let the silence beneath your ribs become wide and weightless. You are not watching anymore. You are within it. The lullaby continues, and tonight, even the one who never dreamed begins to fall inward. The unslumbering knelt in the meadow as if drawn there by something more ancient than gravity. Around them, the grass of light rustled, not from wind, but from the slow ripple of shared breath. Each blade shimmered with the hue of a moment remembered. One was the golden tone of a child's first laugh. Another glowed with the violet of a last goodbye whispered across starlight. These were not colors, truly. They were emotional spectrums, feelings rendered visible in the stillness of this interstellar cradle. The unslumbering placed their hands upon the grass and exhaled. It was a small sound, the first deliberate release they had ever given. And when they did, the meadow changed. Something deep within the field pulsed once, then again, like a heart, remembering how to beat. The lantern at its center, fed by the memory of the dying quasar, flared softly. Its light did not grow brighter, it grew wider. Shadows lengthened not in darkness, but in meaning. They stretched outward, casting faint reflections across the petals of the keeper's ring, across the slow spiraling observatory where Terran kept her quiet vigil, across Solène's vessel, now nearing the edge of the meadow's gravity. The hum of the lullaby shifted, not in pitch, but in architecture. It unfolded like a blooming structure, a cathedral built from hush. Inside the Unslumbering's chest, something ancient gave way. They had lived across ages, walked among black holes and swirling chaos, and yet had never felt what they now felt: surrender. Not of power or identity, but of aloneness. Their every step through the unstable corridor had been a motion of purpose without context, a repetition of a cycle that never invited reflection. But the meadow saw them. Not as a tool, not as a watcher. It saw their ache, their unknowable tension. And it sang. Not for them, not to them, but with them. It included them in its rhythm, offered no condition, made no correction. And so the Unslumbering did the one thing they had never done. They laid down as their form met. The luminous grass, the ripple that had been spreading across the sky's sleepers, quickened. The meadow sang louder, though still softly, like a breath held with reverence. From her drifting orbit, Seren turned her gaze toward the field and began to speak for the first time, not with words, but with visual threads woven from memory and potential. She projected a lattice of color across the sky, each beam crossing with another, stories merging, echoes entwining, paths converging. The tapestry spread like pollen, touching Solin's vessel as it glided into the field. The cartographer of lost gravity dimmed her engines, letting the ship drift to a halt above the soft soil of the meadow. Solène wept. Not with tears, but with signals, slow pulses of harmonic code that translated to one word, repeated again and again: home. The keeper, still in orbit around the petals of loss, let them drift free. The memory blooms spiraled outward like released feathers, no longer needing protection. The past, held and honored, was ready to dissolve into rest. The Threadwalker crossed the meadow's outer edges, weaving paths not for movement, but for connection, bridges between each presence in the lullaby. The listener, who had heard all things and remained untouched, now sat quietly near the Unslumbering side, listening not to the sky, but to their first breath of real sleep. And the treader of feathered time reached the lantern and placed a single thread beside it, an offering of stillness so gentle it could not be spoken of, only felt. Above them, the meadow brightened, not with light, with peace. And then the dream began. It was not like other dreams. It did not spiral or twist. It did not rewrite laws or reshape stars. It moved softly, like a single note held too long in a vast sacred hall. It hummed with the weight of being seen, and every sleeper shared it. Lyra's form shifted slightly in her sleep, curling as if hearing a story remembered from before, her own birth. Seren's wings of prismatic memory folded in, becoming translucent and still. Solin's mind, once mapped entirely to coordinates and loss, slowed until only feeling remained. The Keeper lowered their orbit until they too entered the grass of memory. The listener placed a hand upon the soil. The Threadwalker lay down in a circle they had woven themselves. The treader sat cross-legged beneath the lantern, and in the very center, the Unslumbering turned their face to the sky. The dream did not show images. It did not recite wisdom or prophecy. It simply was. A suspension of aloneness, a shared breath in a cosmic cradle, the sky that had always watched, always moved, always expanded, now held still, not dead, not ended, just resting, cradling, all it had created in a moment of perfect pause. And somewhere, outside time, within every moment and none, the universe exhaled. When the stars sleep, do they dream of waking? Or do they dream of never needing to again? And if the sky itself has learned to rest, what stirs it? What tender whisper, what shift of breath might gently pull it back from dreaming? Let your own breath steady now, not rushed, not resisting. We are moving gently into the part of the lullaby where stillness deepens before anything stirs. The universe does not rise quickly. It listens first. And we are listening too. For a long while, though no clocks marked the time, the meadow remained
untouched. Not by event, not by movement, only by breath. The kind of breath that settles across galaxies when all things that once rushed have found their rhythm.
Each presence within the cradle, Lyra, Siren, Solon, the keeper, the threadwalker, the listener, the treader, and the unslumbering, now slumbered in their own way, whether within body or mind or motion. The meadow had become a singular note, held across space, a tone not to be resolved but to be felt, a hum that kept reality in suspension. But the universe is not only made of quiet. Even in rest, something stirs. It began as the faintest alteration in the field's harmonic. Not disruption, never that, but an expansion, a modulation in the lullaby's melody, as if one more chord was being added, almost hesitantly, to a song already whole. The lantern at the meadow's center flared once, not with urgency, but with a kind of curiosity. Its light bent toward the horizon, and there, like a ripple made visible, the air began to shift. A presence approached, not from above, not from beyond, from within. It had always been there, beneath the rhythm, beneath the soil of memory and the weightless grass. A root consciousness, deep and ancient, not yet named. It was not one of the gathered dreamers. It was not separate from them
either. It was the cradle itself, the field, the meadow, the sleeping sky's own subconscious.
And now, with all its guests held gently in its lullaby, it whispered. No words. Just the shift of warmth beneath cold, just the sound of something leaning toward waking, not from necessity, but from love. That whisper touched Lyra first. Her form, now translucent with dream, exhaled a pulse of light. Not bright, but kind. A glow of shared dreaming. It passed like a wave across the grass, and each sleeper responded, not with movement, but with subtle echo. Solon's vessel, long dormant now, released a faint harmonic from its core, the sound of a home found. Siren's observatory, tethered gently above the field, dimmed its senses as if bowing in gratitude. The petals of the keeper's orbit spiraled inward again, forming a spiral more intricate than before, a symbol of return. The listener placed a single fingertip against the soil. The threadwalker traced a final connection across the field. The treader opened both hands and let the remaining threads of time fall freely into the grass, and the unslumbering smiled. It was not visible, it was not even physical, but it was real. For the first time in the story of their being, they did not brace against experience. They accepted it. The field held them, and within its quiet pattern, they offered something back. Stillness that had never been shared before. A piece of the cosmos that had always watched, now included. A silence that once kept its distance, now adding its tone to the dream. The whisper of the meadow grew into a pulse. Not fast, not urgent, just sure. And in that pulse, something began to change. The sleepers were not stirring, not fully, but the dream itself was evolving. It was no longer only rest, it was now reflection. Images rose, not as memories, but as stories ready to become. The sky that sleeps did not forget its motion. It simply folded it inward, wrapped it in hush, and turned it into meaning. Within the pulse, a child appeared, not physical, but as idea. A being not yet formed, not yet bound by time or shape. It wandered the field, barefoot across the grass of feeling. It did not wake the others. It simply looked at them, with eyes of awe, with understanding born of nothing and everything. This child was the echo of the lullaby's future, a glimpse of what it might yet birth. Not a god, not a savior, just next. The child sat by the lantern, small legs tucked beneath them, and placed a hand on the earth. The pulse stopped, not because it was over, but because the tone had shifted once again. The whisper had done its work. Now, the sky began to breathe differently. Not toward waking, not toward sleep, but toward becoming. Not one of the sleepers stirred, and yet something in each of them responded. Threads within Xiren's mind re-knit. Solan's data core glowed faintly with fresh connection. The Keeper's petals, long freed, returned of their own volition, not to orbit, but to root. Lyra's dream deepened. The Threadwalker's map of emotion rewove itself into a living circle. The treader of time no longer sat still. They were beginning to listen for what would come next. The listener let go of all frequencies but one, the child's heartbeat, and the unslumbering for the first time was not alone. They were surrounded by stillness. They were woven into story. And the story no longer needed to be held in silence. The lullaby had not ended. It had become a womb. What is the first thing said after a silence that lasted forever? Not a command, not a cry, but something so gentle it does not disturb the quiet. It joins it. If the sky speaks now, it does not speak to instruct or to awaken. It speaks to share, to open, to begin again. Let your breath fall into the rhythm of this moment. No longer sleep, not quite waking. This is the seam between, where stillness stretches its hand forward and something new takes it. The child sat beside the lantern for what could have been moments or eons. They did not speak, not at first. They watched. Their hand rested against the soil, and the soil, woven of memory and light and all things that once were, breathed back. The grass around them shimmered softly, responding not to their touch, but to their presence. Here was something not born of sorrow, nor forged by the ache of remembering. Here was possibility, a seed of the next dream, the next breath, the next melody. All around them, the dreamers slept, and yet each was no longer quite asleep. They had moved into the deep interior of rest, the space where boundaries dissolve, where the past no longer binds, and the future does not yet demand. Within this hush, things grew, not fast, not loud, like the root systems of a forest long after fire, quietly threading under ash and soil, preparing to rise again when the time is kind. Xiren's mind, drifting in light above the field, began to weave patterns from future starlight. Solan's, databanks lit with unread symbols, soft and slow, stories not found but felt. The Keeper's petals now gently floated down, embedding themselves across the meadow like stars fallen from orbit. The listener sat still, but deep inside they were not only listening, they were recording. Not data, not sound, but tone. The emotional frequency of peace itself. And they understood this was the first time such a tone had existed, not because the universe lacked it before, but because nothing had ever been still enough, wide enough, ready enough to let it be heard. And at the center, the child opened their mouth. No sound came at first, only a vibration, a hum, softer than the ones that had traveled before. This was not the same lullaby that had pulled the others here. That song had been a call. This was something else. A reply. The child did not mimic what they'd heard. They joined it, added to it. A new harmony.
Higher, lighter, filled with play.
The voice of the dream now extended, reaching into realms the sleepers had never known. It stretched outward beyond the meadow, past the black glass sea and the aurora labyrinth, past the folded horizon, even beyond the great listening dish of the threshold ear. And something responded. The child's hum met a new tone, distant, unsure, but echoing back. A presence in the dark. A being, not yet shaped, not yet named, was listening, and the child smiled. Above them, the sky began to shift, not in color, not in motion. In meaning, the stars, long distant, brightened not in luminosity, but in resonance. They began to align, not in orbits, but in story. Patterns emerged in constellations that had never existed, shapes drawn not by gravity but by emotion. Love, grief, belonging, forgiveness, wonder, all mapped across the heavens. The sky that once slept had opened its dream for others. It had become a mirror, not reflecting light, but reflecting presence. And the child, still unnamed, stood. They did not run or dance or speak again. They simply walked. Across the field, through the grass of memory, between the sleeping ones. They paused beside each one, resting a hand gently near them. Not touching, only letting them feel that they were not alone. Lyra, so long the first sleeper, exhaled deeply. Her fingers twitched once, the motion of someone preparing to wake, not in surprise, but in joy. Saren's wings folded tighter, wrapping around her. As if in anticipation of a question she was finally ready to answer. Solan's ship shifted course without instruction. She was no longer a vessel. She was a pilgrim. The keeper turned their face to the horizon, no longer to protect the petals, but to welcome new ones. The threadwalker paused in their weaving, not to end, but to begin a new thread entirely. The listener stood. For the first time in their endless watch, they would speak. Not yet, but soon, and the unslumbering dreamed. Their face, once held in perfect control, softened. Their body pulsed faintly with the rhythm of the meadow. And within their mind, for the first time, a picture formed, a circle of beings all gathered, all different, all whole. Not perfect, not finished, just whole. The child saw this and nodded, and then they spoke the first word, not loud, not in any language. It wasn't even a word the way we think of words. It was welcome, not the sound, the feeling. That word rippled outward, not as command, not as invitation, but as homecoming. And the field, the lantern, the petals, the dreamers, all responded. The meadow pulsed, the sky breathed, and far beyond the horizon, a new sleeper stirred. How do dreams end when they are not broken but completed? Is it a closing or a soft unfolding into something new? And when the stars have sung their final lullaby and all the cosmos has lain down beside you, what is left but peace itself? This is the final breath of our journey, not an ending but a hush. Settle with me here, just for a moment longer. The sky still sleeps and you are part of it now. The child who whispered welcome had not truly come to awaken anyone. They had come to remind. In the softness of their presence, the meadow shifted into its final form. Not a location, not a field, but a state of being. The grass became memory incarnate, woven with every story ever dreamed and every one that never got the chance to be. The lantern grew into a star, small and close, whose light cast no shadows, only warmth. Above, the sky was no longer a curtain draped in stars, but a quiet ocean where breath became echo, and echo became peace. And slowly, the dreamers began to open their eyes. Lyra sat up first, blinking slowly, as if waking from the most beautiful nothing. She said nothing. There was no need. Beside her, Tyrion drifted gently down from the observatory, her prismatic wings now settled softly against her back. Solon emerged from her vessel and stepped onto real ground for the first time in an eternity. The keeper walked barefoot through petals that had landed and rooted, blooming into flowers that only opened for farewells. The threadwalker held out a newly woven loop of light, a symbol of connections made and still to come. The listener approached the lantern and whispered one final frequency into its flame, a farewell to silence. The treader took the child's
hand, and the unslumbering stood, utterly changed, not because they had dreamed, but because the dream had included them. The meadow, alive now with presence and memory and becoming, held them all without keeping them.
It offered no destination, no instructions, it offered rest. And in that rest, the lullaby became legacy, not sung, not told, but shared. As each of the gathered souls began to walk once more, outward, upward, inward, they carried it with them. They would become the next soft places in the universe, the next cradles, the next gentle notes in the song of all things. The lullaby had not ended. It had become them, and you. You were never only listening. You were always part of the field. The hum you heard was yours. The peace you felt was your own. Perhaps tonight, you are not just the listener, but the next dreamer. And when you close your eyes, the stars will hum you home. Thank you for spending this time beneath the sleeping sky. May its stillness stay with you wherever you go. Sleep well.